number 4.
And he said that that the descendants, the offspring, who's to inherit the promise, were enslaved in Egypt. Correct. Genesis 25:18 tells us where Ishmael lived. Where did Ishmael go to? Let's all read together. Genesis 25:18. His descendants, Ishmael's descendants, settled in the area of Havilah, to Shur, near the border of Egypt. As you go towards Ashur, and they live in hostility towards all their brethren in that area. Indeed, when in Exodus we read that Moses led the children of Israel and the mixed multitude included the Ishmaelite. Why? Because Ruth was a Moabite, and Ruth is in the genealogy of David. She was an Ishmaelite. So indeed, the Ishmaelites were oppressed as well as the Israelites, and they lived in Egypt, just like the prophecy said.
The descendants that would inherit the promise were those who were enslaved in Egypt. Yahya19 says that this is correct. Yahya then makes the following points. Point number 1, Ishmaelites were persecuted by Pharaoh. Point number 2, Ishmaels were among those who came out of Egypt with the Israelites. Point number 3, Ruth was a Moabite. Let's look at all these 3 points and see if they're correct. Claim number 1, Ishmaelites were persecuted by Pharaoh. There is no text, not one verse that says this. Yahya19 was asked during the debate and after to provide the proof for this, yet he was unable to come up with the verse. Claim number 2, Ishmaelites were among those who came out of Egypt with the Israelites. Again, there is no text, not one verse that says this. Yahya19 was also asked during the debate and after to provide proof for this, yet again he was unable to come up with anything to back this up. Claim number 3, Ruth was a Moabite. Yahya19 tried to tie Ruth to Ishmael. What Ruth had to do with the Exodus is a mystery to me, but somehow Yahya19 tried to make the case for Ishmael coming out of Egypt through Ruth by making her an Ishmaelite. But what do we find in the Torah about the father of the Moabites? Were they Ishmaelites? Genesis 19 verse 36 and 37. And Lot's daughter conceived from their father, and the elder bore a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of Moab until this day. Ruth not only had nothing to do with the Exodus, but she also had absolutely nothing to do with Ishmael. She was a daughter of Lot. Notice that Yahya19 is trying to make Ishmael look significant and tries to squeeze him into the promise God made with Abraham. Because after all, if Ishmael is not part of the covenant, then he can't be who Muslims claim he is. And then Islam has nothing to stand on. But as we have seen, either all 3 of the points we just examined could either not be substantiated from the biblical text or were simply just made up. Therefore, argument number 4 that Yahya19 made for Ishmael is proven to have failed. Argument number 5, separating the covenant from the promise.
Now I agree, the inheritance, once again, does go to Isaac. There's no doubt about that. But the promise is a nation. This is the promise.
According to Yahya19, Isaac got the covenant, but Ishmael got the promise. I have asked him during the debate where the promise was separated from the covenant, and pointed out that the covenant and the promise are one and the same. Yahya19 cannot show us that there was a promise separate from the covenant that God made with Abraham. Argument number 6, multiply exceedingly.
Furthermore, in Genesis 17:1, I told the audience to keep in mind the word multiply you exceedingly. This is a promise, the covenant made with the fruitful offspring. Once again, the fruitful offspring so far is Ishmael, before Isaac was even born. The terminology multiply him exceedingly only appears to Ishmael.
Yahya19 claimed that the term multiply you exceedingly was only applied to Ishmael, not to anyone else. And because God used the term multiplied exceedingly with Abraham, then we can be sure that this promise goes through Ishmael and not through any descendants of the other sons of Abraham. Is that right? I have to repeat my response from argument number 1. That God would multiply Abraham exceedingly simply means that Abraham would have many descendants. Abraham had many sons, and his sons had many descendants as well. Therefore, Abraham had many descendants. It means nothing more and nothing less. But lest Yahya19 or any other Muslim want to make more about this than is implied, here is a verse from Genesis to Isaac's offspring. Genesis 47, verse 27. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they acquired property in it, and they were prolific and multiplied exceedingly. Since we have seen that this claim of Yahya19 is not true, it is proven yet again that the claim of Yahya19 for Ishmael, anything to do with the covenant, is proven to have failed. Argument number 7. The word goy means Gentile nation.
Oh, and by the way, the word for nation is not a bad word. It means a nation of Gentiles. In Hebrew, it means a nation of Gentiles. I don't know how my opponent would ever say that's a bad word, somehow bashing Ishmael by saying that God said he's going to have a great nation.
I think that the argument of Yahya19 is that since the word goy means Gentile nation, i.e. non-Jewish, it can revert to Israel. So therefore, it's about Ishmael. Well, no. Genesis 46 verse 3. And he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid of going down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. Great nation here is Goy Gadol. Just as Ishmael is promised to be a numerous nation, so also Israel, Isaac's son, is promised to be made a numerous nation by God. Once again, Yahya19 makes a claim for Ishmael, and when we examine it, his argument for Ishmael is proven to have failed.